And we start tonight with Scott Swan, live in South Bend, who has a reaction to that guilty verdict today. Scott?
Yeah, and it was a lightning quick verdict, just 3 hours. That's all the jury needed to come back with the word guilty 53 different times, convicting Mark Leonard in the deadly Richmond Hills blast that took place 2.5 years ago. When everyone exited the court today, the first two people that we wanted to talk to were the dads of Jennifer and Dion Longworth. They haven't talked very much during this trial, but they promised they would talk today, and here's what they said.
I don't know that we'll have a party, but we're all going to sit around probably and cry a little bit and say, okay, we got all we could get.
I'm sad. It's sentencing somebody to prison or anything is not anything to be happy about.
So I'm a dad, and I grieve for my daughter, and I miss her every day.
Forgiving means you say what he did was okay in some respects, so I can't do that. I do have to let go of it every day.
There were 19 days of testimony in this trial here in South Bend. Many of the Richmond Hill residents were here to listen or to testify. In fact, 86 of them got up on the witness stand. And so we wondered today, how are those residents feeling after hearing that Mark Leonard's been convicted 53 different times? Here's what those residents told us.
We're very happy for the verdict. Justice has been served. It's been a long time coming.
People like that cannot be walking the streets. You can't do things like this for money. And, you know, it just kind of shows what greed does to people.
Eyewitness News reporter Rich Van Wyk has been in court every day during this 7-week trial. Rich, you were in a court today, and you'll be here again tomorrow because there's more activity.
Everyone will be back to court tomorrow. Tomorrow, the prosecution will argue that because of the circumstances of this crime, Mark Leonard should be sentenced to life in prison without parole. When Mark Leonard comes back to court, Judge John Marnoka will consider prosecutors' claims that because of the extraordinary circumstances of his crimes, Leonard should be in prison for life without parole. His attorneys will object. They've already filed a motion to dismiss.
Primarily because there's case law that says that it can't be filed in a case, several different aggravators that they haven't proven, and so we don't believe that there's any legal basis to do the life without parole.
Although deputy prosecutors will argue for life without parole, prosecutor Terry Curry concedes it may not matter.
With a guilty verdict on the knowing murder, all the other counts, I think effectively whatever sentence Mr. Leonard receives is going to be for the rest of his life.
6 men and 6 women needed less than 3 hours to reach their verdicts. Lead prosecutor Denise Robinson met them afterwards.
I simply, as the jurors came by, I simply thanked them. Some of them said thank you back, but that was about it.
The evidence against Leonard was overwhelming. 170 witnesses, 2,200 exhibits, most collected from the crime scene. The testimony of ex-girlfriend Maserati Shirley and numerous other experts. The state needed 19 days to present its case.
You know, there wasn't a key point to this trial that I can point to. This was truly the, as I told the jury, building a wall with bricks of evidence. And it took each brick, you know, you built it brick by brick. Sometimes it goes up easily, sometimes not so easily, but you have to approach it that way.
Now the attention shifts to the remaining alleged co-conspirators. Maserati Shirley has already pled guilty as part of her agreement to testify. Bob Leonard stands trial in January, and after that, Glenn Holtz and Gary Thompson. The victims and families of Richmond Hill have many more days in court. Another day in court will be 30 days from now when Mark Leonard is sentenced. The quick calculation is that even if not given life without parole, Scott, he could receive hundreds of years in prison, which would in fact amount to life in prison.
And tomorrow in court, the final words from Dion Longworth as part of an audio piece of evidence that'll be entered in court tomorrow.
The judge decided that this particular conversation, Dion Longworth had with a security person pleading for help, pleading for someone to get him out of his burning basement, was prejudicial, did not belong in the trial, but he left the door open for this to be used in the sentencing phase of this trial, and we expect it will be played in open court tomorrow morning. It should be very disturbing.
All right, we'll be back in court tomorrow and have more coverage for you tonight at 11 on the Night Beat. For Rich Van Wyk, I'm Scott Swan in South Bend, Channel 13 Eyewitness News. And
All right, thank you, Scott. A big win for the prosecution, but also such sadness outside of court today. Well, tonight we are hearing from survivors of that 2012 explosion. For people who live in the Southside neighborhood that was devastated by the blast, that guilty verdict day was a long time coming. Steve Jefferson continues our live coverage tonight. He joins us live on the South Side in the Richmond Hill neighborhood.
Yeah, Anne-Marie, this is that infamous explosion site you see behind me. This has been a very emotional day for people here in the Richmond Hill subdivision, especially those who covered and followed the trial day by day up until verdict time. Glenn Olvey, he returned here to the subdivision. He used to live next door to the Longworths and Maserati Shirley. His house is now gone because of the explosion, but after hearing the verdict, he returned here where he used to live to help him process today's guilty verdict. His former neighbors are doing the very same thing. For so many of them, after months of waiting and wondering, they strongly believe this is the beginning of justice after having their lives turned upside down.
I definitely believe it was the correct verdict. Makes me think of everybody in this community, makes me think about the lives that were lost.
Anybody who lived through that night in this neighborhood is stronger. There's going to be scars that never go away.
And the people here in the Richmond Hill subdivision say today's guilty verdict is a start to their healing process, even knowing there's still more trials to come. Live in Richmond Hill, Steve Jefferson, Channel 13 Eyewitness News.
Tough day there. All right. Thank you, Steve. Don't forget, we'll have for you extensive coverage of the case and Mark Leonard's trial, all compiled together in one place online at WTHR.com. There you can watch video of reaction to the guilty verdict from the fathers of the victims, as well as from prosecutors and many of the neighbors who were in South Bend today. We also have a breakdown of all those charges, 53 of them, and a timeline of events. It's all at WTHR.com. When you go there, just look under Hot Topics.